Hi everyone! If you are looking to get into ranged, you most likely heard about the best in slot arrows, these 4 Elder God arrows, as well as some other ones here. A viewer requested me to create a guide about the arrows, and since this is primarily a ranged channel, I shall. To start, I want to break down the arrows into 3 different categories. The camp arrows, the arrows that we want to be primarily camping all the time. The switch arrows, arrows that are more suited as switches. And the other arrows, the ones that don't fit both of these categories. With the categories established, the most important part of every specific target we are targeting are what should our camp arrows be and what should our switch arrows be. Throughout this video, I will briefly touch on what the arrows do on a surface level, as well as go in depth about how I would use it. The goal isn't to go into super detail about the super best sweaty way to maximize their usage. I want to think of this from a more average PVMer mindset. I will also refrain from using any ability stalling, speedrun pre-building, or things that's supposed to be removed in the future like Wen Sporing. This is also from a soloing perspective, so it may vary in the group content. Let's start with the most important category, the camp arrows. When deciding what arrows to camp at a certain target, the first question should be, is the target a dragon? If the answer is yes, use Jas Dragonbane arrows. These arrows are pretty basic. You will gain extra 30% damage and 20% hit chance on every attack without needing to worry about arrow stacks. The bonuses you get from these arrows is simply overwhelming to even consider other camp arrows. If the answer is no, then we move on to the next question. Is the target a demon? Since this is the same situation as Jas Dragonbane arrows, if the answer is yes, use Jas Demonbane arrows. If the answer is no, then we move on to the next question. Can we poison the target? If the answer is no, then next question is, do we have 100% accuracy against the target with foe arrows? If the answer is no, use Wen arrows. Before I go into details about Wen arrows, let's head back and say the answer is actually yes. Foe arrows here is simple. It increases our damage by 50% at the cost of 10% accuracy. Every attack we do will have its damage boosted by 50%. Wen arrows is an arrow that will instead build stacks up to 15. Some abilities like Piercing Shot and Greater Ricochet with the Corroming 4 perk will build up more than one stack, Greater Ricochet giving 7 stacks, Piercing Shot giving 2 for example. But if we were to lose our stacks by using either a Threshold, Ultimate, or a Special attack, then our stacks get consumed and get replaced by a buff that boosts your damage depending on how much stacks you had. Defenses that don't attack the target like Reflect and Devotion will not consume 1 stacks, but using an ability that does attack targets like Debilitate will. Bleed damage is also boosted by Wen arrows. When using thresholds, you don't gain any Wen arrow stack, so if you thought you can rapid fire and rebuild your Wen arrows, you can't. Corruption Shot and Fragmentation Shot will give you 1 stack. Which one is better? Let's review the next question. Do you have trouble or dislike keeping track of more stacks in your buff bar? If your answer is yes, use foe arrows. If your answer is no, I will share my own experiences. Personally, if I was actually to put in a bit of effort in keeping track of my Wen arrow stacks, historically, my PRs are much faster than with foe arrows. At the same time, if I was less proactive in keeping track of my Wen arrows, I find the results between foe and Wen arrows tend to be close to equal. Wen will have the slight upper edge however, because even if you weren't fully efficiently maximizing your Wen stacks, as long as you pay some attention to it, you will actually find it better. Agrica will instantly gain you 7 stacks and already gives me 21% damage on strong abilities like Rapid Fire or both Last Guardian spec. That alone still gave me faster times than anything foe did by a small margin. Places where Wen arrows especially benefit is if there are targets where you might not have 100% accuracy, such as Blackstone Dragon during the hand phase. If you want to be sure you have 100% accuracy against the target, Wen arrows are your go-to arrows. I find accuracy auras also less useful because you often get 100% accuracy when one arrows are active during your thresholds, specs, and ultimates, which are more meaningful abilities. With new bosses having more defense in the future, one arrows will be your best friend over foe arrows. Now, let's take a step back to question 3. Can we poison the target? If the answer is yes, does the target have enough HP to build close to 400 big arrow stacks? To make this easier to understand, Ambassador with 1 mil HP, Hardmode Care Pack with 1.4 million HP on the main target, High Enrage Archglacier, and I only got 1 kill on Solak, but Solak is another one. Big arrows are especially powerful when you can get close to 400 arrow stacks, though even around 300 stacks is pretty powerful already. If the answer is no, go to question 4. If the answer is yes, use big arrows. Well, easier said than done when saying to use big arrows. So how do big arrows actually work? Well, it's simple. You attack your target with big arrows, and your poison damage to the target increases. Just make sure to refresh it every 30 seconds if you do switch the arrows out, or choose another target by attacking the same target again, or all the stacks will disappear. Combined with Cinderbanes, Weapon Poison, Dreadnips, we can do some serious poison damage. It's even stronger in a group because this also works with other players' poison damage. All of this poison damage will be boosted by the amount of stacks you have on a target. Using abilities like Gricko or Rapid Fire, we can build a lot of stacks quickly, and that poison damage will start to add up, provided we don't kill the target too fast. My favorite places to use big arrows is Hardmode Care Pack. Without the extra damage from poison, I would take much longer to kill the boss with 1 arrows. Once I build up to 400 poison stacks, we can also switch to 1 arrows, and that's even more damage. The main problem with big arrows is the issue of worrying about all the stacks disappearing and the pressure to refresh it before it disappears. With the camp arrows established, choose your camp arrow and that'll be the main arrow you'll use the most at your targets. Switch arrows. As the category name suggests, this is about the arrows you should switch to in combat. The most popular one to switch to is Deathspore arrows. How does it work? Every time you crit, you will build Deathspore arrow stacks, and once it reaches 5, your next adrenaline costing ability will cost 0 adrenaline. It's basically a free Relentless perk if you use it within the next 9 seconds. Relentless does take priority. Then it will go on cooldown for 60 seconds, but it will refresh faster if you crit. The way I use it, as I established in my Deathspore probability video, is to rapid fire to get the elite Dracolich buff, and then use Gricko, and most of the time I would have my 5 stacks. Then I would drop an Incendiary, and then a Death Swiftness, and then drink an Adrenaline pot if it's not on cooldown. Then swap back to my camp arrows. But what if you don't have elite Dracolich? Well, then you're just gonna have to pray your crits will crit at the right time. Life's tough. When should you choose to use Deathspore arrows to get an Incendiary then? For me, the best time to time it right is if there's a lot of time for me to damage the boss in the future. For example, after Carapax's tearing phase, I would do that combo and have plenty of time to use all my abilities on Carapax after. Or as shown before, right before Vorkath returns after Vorkath flies away. But if the boss is close to dead or close to phasing, I will forget using Deathspore arrows on Incendiary and use it on Death Swiftness to just finish the kill. Sometimes if you find it's taking too long to get your Deathspore stacks, I would just say forget it and switch back to your camp arrows and continue the kill. I find if I spend too much time trying to get that Deathspore luck, it just makes the kill take longer once I get the stacks. I would say screw it and drop Death Swiftness. Especially at hard mode Vorkath, because if I spend too much time at the beginning trying to mess around with Deathspore arrows and Incendiary shot, I will actually not get the Ice Spike skip, which is just more annoying. Another cool way to use it is if the boss currently cannot be damaged, then I have all the time I need to build up my Deathspore stacks and drop the Incendiary shot easily. Now let's talk about the other arrow, Splintering arrows. These are a bit more difficult to use, and I don't use them at all anymore because it's too much work for too little. If you have greater dazing shot, you would use it and then all your next attacks will build more puncture stacks. So, dazing shot and Gricko, more stacks and the cap goes up to 13. What I used to use them for is at ED1 cereal for 1 cycling. While waiting for the blobs to heal the boss, I will build up to 13 stacks using that for extra bonus damage to ensure I get that one cycle. But I can one cycle the boss without ever needing Splintering Arrows' help. If you're in a phase where the boss is invulnerable, then you can use Splintering Arrows to build up stacks quickly. Or you can just be building up one arrow stacks in death, or both. But chances are, if you are me, you will lose all 13 stacks because you were too busy rapid firing, and then following that up with not a daisy shot or salt in the wound to refresh the puncture stacks. So in short, splitting arrows are usually not worth it, but there are times where you could try to use it. Blackstone arrows. If you don't have 100% accuracy at a boss, including if you added the 3% accuracy from Essence of Finality, then use these arrows to weaken the boss up to 15 stacks. I usually either use them at the start of a fight like the Katra to get to 15 stacks and then switch back to my camp arrows, or when I have time to do it, a Grigger with Blackstone arrows can build up the stacks quickly. Last but not least, the other arrows. Thine arrows, don't even use them. Use them to make the Elder God arrows. Primal arrows. If you want to cheap out on using God arrows, these are your cheap arrows to use. That's pretty much it. Alternatively, you can use Deathspore arrows as your cheap camp arrows instead. For example, at a Slayer task if you don't want to waste God arrows. Otherwise, you can just use the Primal arrows if you don't want to waste them either. And that wraps up my guide about the endgame arrows. If there's any questions that you may have, feel free to ask. If this helped you, please subscribe. Thank you, and bye bye.